So,
and Father, in this discussion of Francis, you've recently referred to him as a kind of a neo-pagan. Could you expound upon that a little bit more?
well, if you look at the history of Francis up until this point, you see more and more people, laymen and clergy, even in the New Order, are labeling Francis a non-Catholic. They're saying he's not Catholic, he doesn't have the Catholic faith, he's speaking against the Catholic faith. There are those even who are willing to venture the fact that he is a modernist, right? But I don't know of anybody who's actually said, well, okay, he's not a Catholic, neither in his belief nor in his religious practice. So what is he? I mean, what is his religion? Now, some would answer, well, he's a modernist. But, modernism is a belief system. If you read the encyclical of St. Pius X, condemning the errors of modernism, dated September 8, 1907, you see St. Pius X begins his analysis of modernism by saying it is based on false philosophy. So he seems to indicate that modernism is more of a philosophy, false philosophy, than an actual religion. It's like a false religion or false philosophy that actually begets a kind of false religion, okay? So, I mean, people can argue the point, well, does modernism actually constitute a religion? I would argue modernism constitutes like a fountainhead from which you could derive many, many different religions, okay? But they all have certain basic principles in common. Sort of like Cartesian philosophy, Descartes, back in the 1600s, a mathematician, spawns these ideas, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. He just proved his own existence to himself. And the Cartesian ideas have spawned multiple different philosophies, all of them they're all fathered by Cartesianism. So there are multiple different religions fathered by modernism and the fundamental principles of modernism. One of those false religions that coincides perfectly with modernism is neo-paganism. Neo-paganism might be the purest example of modernism. And I believe that Francis really is a neo-pagan in his belief. And if you examine everything he's written, everything he said about Mother Earth and the Earth Goddess and Pachamama, all the things he's done, even recently having the thousands of children following him and leading the chant, nature is our future, nature is our future. The indigenous people religion, experiencing Mother Earth in contact with, the rivers and the forests, and now they have personalities, right? They're actually like animists, because they have spirits in them and so on. I think Francis is absolutely a neo-pagan. That's not to say he's not a modernist, because, as I say, that's a certain direction that neo-modernism points out. If you take the fundamental modernist idea that you find God where you experience God, and then the neo-pagans say, well, we find God where we experience him in nature. And that's our indigenous religion, which is what Francis is all about. Well, that's the experience of God that Francis has. That's the experience of God that Francis actually promotes. He's the prophet of that, the prophet of neo-paganism. Experience God, find him in nature. A la Pachamama, indigenous religions, call the spirits from the four winds, by beating the drum and smoking the pipe and all that, like in Canada, right? Took part in the ceremony there. This is the example that he sets. I believe that really is his religion. That's his faith, I should say. And now he's cultivating his religion. Okay, he's coming up with these indigenous rites to express this experience of God. Modernism is the fountainhead of this, and the new order that came out of Vatican II is the religion of modernism. But I think as modernism is now focusing more and more through Francis and through the Vatican as neo-paganism, it's kind of manifesting itself as neo-paganism, so the religion, the Novus Ordo, is going to be turning more and more to neo-paganism in its practice. And it's going to be flooded with these neo-pagan practices. In a sense, it already is. Now, as a very wise man just pointed out, after we had a little discussion on this subject, he said, well, remember what Ettore Gotti Tedeschi said. Tedeschi was the compatriot of Archbishop Vigano. The director of the Vatican Bank was none other than Ettore Gotti Tedeschi, the financier. He was a financial man, economics and so on. So both of them were sacked at the same time. Vigano was sacked, and Tedeschi was sacked at the same time. Tedeschi was kind of, they had to somehow undermine his reputation because of what he knew. I mean, they had to kind of discredit him. He came out and he made a statement that was very, very significant. We talked about it earlier, years ago. Tedeschi said they're actually purveying a new religion in the Vatican. He said the new religion in the Vatican and the new religion coming out of the Vatican, he called environmental Gnosticism. Remember that? Environmental Gnosticism. And I'm sure most people, when they hear this, their eyes kind of go blank. And they think, what is that? That's a religion, environmental Gnosticism, and that's exactly right. I don't think anybody could have put it more clearly. I mean, I give a tip of the credit to Ettore Tedeschi because he named it perfectly. He pegged it. And that's exactly what neo-paganism is. So when I was saying that Francis is a neo-pagan in his belief, this gentleman pointed out, well, remember what Tedeschi said, environmental Gnosticism. And I thought, that's exactly it, isn't it? That's what corresponds perfectly to Francis's new religion. In his new religion of neo-paganism. Look it up. See. Read the characteristics, the quote-unquote doctrines, although Francis is allergic to the word doctrine. Read the belief system of the neo-pagan concept of God that they experience in nature and how they experience it. And you'll find what Francis has been pushing and pushing and pushing all these years and continues to push in his climate change crusade, anti-crusade, and all the rest. It's all that. It is environmental Gnosticism. It is neo-paganism. And that's why you're going to find more and more of this manifesting itself in the Novus Ordo. You know, the whole thing with the Synod, I mean, everything falls into place with this. Modernism as the fountainhead of these ideas and turning everything back to the paganistic idea of experiencing God. By the way, if the modernists hold that God is to be experienced, but you have to distinguish between the authentic experience and the non-authentic experience. And you have to cancel the non-authentic experience. For example, you have indigenous people in the wilds, in the Amazon, and they're living off let's say the river, and they're experiencing God in the forest, they're experiencing God in the rivers, and so on. They're communicating with the gods of these things. That's authentic for Francis. The traditional Mass, traditional sacraments, traditional faith and religion, traditional catechism, that's not an authentic experience. Francis has said so. The traditional Mass is not an authentic reflection or statement. It does not correspond to the modern understanding. He said it's no longer applicable, right? The Novus Ordo Mass is. That's authentic. The old traditional Mass, that's no longer authentic. It has to be canceled. So actually, ours is the only religion, our Catholic faith, and the religion that practices that traditional Catholic faith is really the only religion that is not an authentic experience of who God is now. Basically, anything else goes. Right? Francis is not going to speak against the Islam of Hamas. He's not going to talk against it. He's already told the Imam, right, that God wills all religions. And as far as the Imam is concerned, that's Allah, right? Yeah. And Francis might say, yeah, Allah, that's what I mean. You know, this is your experience of God, and it's perfectly authentic, but not yours, Tom, because you're a traditional Catholic. That has to be canceled. It's the one thing that has to be canceled. What does it tell you? What does it tell you about him? So in any case, again, when they set this up, and I mentioned the other day, taking the surveys are a very important part of that, because that's how they find out what people are experiencing, of who God is. They make surveys and they submit them to the Vatican. And so the Vatican, they can process all this and say, okay, let's read the surveys and see what people are experiencing about God. Well, notice they've already cooked the books on that, in the sense that, very few traditional Catholics are going to play into that. Very few traditional Catholics are going to be filling out these surveys, because they don't believe that faith is a matter of taking surveys and seeing what people think. So traditional Catholics aren't going to do that. Who are going to be filling out these surveys? People who believe with the process. But it's not a Catholic process to begin with. So it's already predetermined what's going to come in on those surveys. And if any survey comes in that's more traditional, that's not authentic. It's not an authentic experience of who God is, so it has to go into the trash immediately. And ultimately, it's going to come down to Francis to decide what's an authentic experience of God and what's not. Well, he's already told you. The authentic experience of God is Pachamama. It's the trees and the forest and the Amazon River. This is the authentic experience of God. It's God in nature, and it's in the indigenous religions that he's willing to participate in. That's where he finds God. He's a neo-pagan. It's something that people just have to face, the reality of it.
Brother, I could see a lot of Nova Sordo Catholics who might agree with your assessment, your critique of Francis, but I could see them very, very quickly saying, well, this is just Francis. He's just a bad pope, but his evil papacy is going to pass, and then we're going to have a good pope. So what we need to do is just hold fast, just stay in the Nova Sordo Church, and kind of tolerate, put up with Francis, and just kind of wait it out. And then we're going to have hopefully have a good pope after.
So all of these cardinals are going to be voting for the next pope. All of these cardinals are appointed by Francis. The majority of them, I think, at least half of them now, are appointed by Francis, right? Yeah. And yes, he's talking about reworking the system, the election system again, to make it virtually impossible for anybody with a Catholic faith to be elected. And if you got somebody in there who had a scintilla of the Catholic faith left, they'd find a way to get rid of him. They'd get him out of there and move on, as they did with Francis. So, Francis is already preparing the way for some radical who will make him look like, I won't say St. Thomas Aquinas, but at least it'll make Francis look at least Christian in comparison, and that's going to be quite a trick. He's already called for a theology that will not have the face of Christ, right? He's already called for that in the church. So what does that tell you? What should it tell them?